All right, we're live. Give us about a minute. Let some people trickle in here. We got a few people in. Welcome, everybody. Sure, everyone's minds have already switched over to USC, but we do have some things to discuss about today's game. All right, so we'll start. Welcome, everyone. BSD postgame live. Tim Aiden, Patrick Kerbler, my trusty co-host, is out of town for the weekend. So joining me in his place is our BSD pal, Lando. Lando, how are you feeling after that game?
Well, it's a win, I guess. It's kind of how I'm feeling at this point. I definitely went through the kind of the blah phase immediately after the game and most of the game, really. It's not the kind of game that you get super excited about, but it's also not the kind of game that you're leaving it with, 10,000 questions either. There's just nothing that was, I would say, super inspiring about the effort. But they did get the win, a 16-point win, a game that UCLA really, as much as they moved the ball well, they never really truly threatened Penn State. And
no, I never really felt the game was truly in doubt, even early on. So go ahead.
yeah, so I mean, just the way that the Bruins moved the ball, I think is a concern. But we talked about a little bit off air, the bend but don't break kind of philosophy on defense really served Penn State well at the end. And there are lots of positives. We can get into that with Abdul Carter. I think was a lot more active than he's been the last couple games, the first few games at least. I thought Zackie Wheatley had a great start to the game, and there are some other bright spots. Certainly, Liam Clifford's another one on the offensive side of the ball. So there's definitely some positives to get out of this game. It's not all kind of doom and gloom, especially given who the next opponent is.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Uninspiring is a term I'm seeing thrown around a lot on the Penn State internets right now, and I'd be inclined to agree with that. But then, like I said too, it's not a game where you ever felt like UCLA had a real chance at pulling an upset. And to Penn State's credit, they scored enough, especially in the second half, to effectively put the game away and leave little doubt that they were going to win this. So at least they didn't get a scare, let's say, from UCLA. And while there were maybe some things that definitely need a little concerning, on both sides of the ball, I'd say some of those are fixable enough. I mean, probably the biggest thing offensively, ground game, it was okay. Katron Allen sometimes picked up some chunks of yardage, but definitely lacked explosiveness without Nick Singleton in there, who it turns out, even though he had dressed and I guess his name was announced as a starter on the video boards of the game, he ended up not playing a single snap. And during the post-game interview on Fox, James Franklin said they found out right before the start of the game that he wouldn't be available. So that kind of explains it. My guess, I'm not going to speculate much, but I would guess it's probably bumps and bruises, and probably, they figured they could probably beat UCLA anyway without him. Definitely need to get him healthy though for next week against UCLA, because it was pretty clear how much they were missing his explosiveness today, not just in the run game, but in the passing game too. But to the credit of some other guys, Liam Clifford especially, we did get some explosive pass plays later on in the game after a very sleepy first quarter for the offense. Clifford went over 100 yards, had 107 yards. You can see him ticker down there. And then Tyler Warren, he had the only touchdown reception for Penn State today. But a decent game for on the passing side. Rushing side, just maybe efficient at times, but just lacking explosiveness. And we mentioned defense, Lando. Some people are gonna. I'm thinking about this out loud because I'm doing the position grades, which will go up tomorrow. But on the one hand, yeah, they usually move the ball better than we expected they would, especially when they were considering they were playing their backup quarterback who had only thrown 5 career passes. Now, granted, that backup is a lot more mobile than their starter tends to be. So could be just part of like they weren't really preparing for him to be the guy. They were preparing as if Ethan Garbers, the injured quarterback starter, was going to play. But they definitely, on the one hand, you could say it was a little concerning how well they moved the ball at times. But on the other hand, look, the starters held them to just 3 points. They scored 8 points in the final minute in garbage time. When it's all backups in there on defense. But so it's really bit of a mixed bag. But you know what? As I said before, bend but don't break. How would you? I guess how would you rate the defense's performance today, just given what the final score ended up being?
As a teacher, I kind of oscillate between B or C. I would say it's kind of an average performance. It depends on how you're grading it. Are you grading it as overall effort, or are you grading it on the points allowed? Because I think, like you pointed out, the points allowed, certainly it's a strong effort in that sense. But the amount of yards churned up, and I guess in a way the fourth down conversion attempts by UCLA that were stopped, I think, got to, show the growth of the front seven, the pass rush improvement, and certainly the kind of showcase guys like Zane Durant and Dennis Sutton, and certainly Carter as well. So, I'm concerned about the pass coverage in zone, the over the middle throws. That's something that has plagued Penn State for a long time. That's a concern I have. Tackling in space, which that's a general thing that is hard for anybody really, but certainly Penn State had, I think, shown more promise with that than the first few games. Certainly, again, guys like Rojas and Jalen Reed, I think, were particularly good in space, and just that it concerns me against teams like USC and Ohio State going forward. So I know, like you said at the top, we're trying to keep it to UCLA and not thinking about the symptom of how is this defense going. If this defense shows up against Ohio State and UCLA or USC, how is that going to go for Penn State? But I think just given what they had to work with, again, as you mentioned, that new quarterback that wasn't 100% sure they would be going up against Justin Martin. They didn't know for sure if Garbers was going to play or not. He's, as you said, he's more mobile. That's another dimension that they had to account for. So I would say maybe a C+ defense, I think, is probably where I'd go. It would be higher, if they had done a little bit better in stopping some of those drives. UCLA had at least, I want to say 3 or 4 times they got into Penn State territory. I could be wrong on the 4. I think it was at least 3.
Here.
And then they were, fortunate with a couple great individual efforts to stop drives. But yeah, I would say probably about a C+ is where I would go.
That's fair. I think right now in my head, I don't give overall grades to
Right.
but overall average, yeah, maybe like overall B minus, maybe a B. I mean, I'll have to, if I had to break it down by position, though, I think I would say D line gets the highest grade. They were pretty good at, they were a little disruptive and they were able to keep the ground game mostly in check. I'd say secondary would probably get the worst grade out of all the units on the defense just because of how they got hard up. But again, you mentioned about drives. I'm looking at the drive charts here. So after Penn State opened with 3 and out, UCLA 11 plays, 46 yards, eats up 6:21 on the clock. But Penn State, bend but don't break, 4th and 1 at the Nittany Lion 23. They stuff running back TJ Harden to get turnover on downs. They don't end up doing it much there, but then next possession for UCLA, 6 plays, 21 yards and a punt. Penn State gets a touchdown. This is early second quarter. This is when they're starting to cook offensively, and then UCLA comes downfield, 8 plays, 68 yards. They do get in the red zone, but they stall at the Penn State 7, forced to kick a field goal. Offense comes back, scores another touchdown. This is when it felt like Penn State was starting to put some real distance between them and the Bruins, and kind of close the door on any possibility of this game being a nail biter towards the end. And then you saw them get, especially like when you saw them get a 3 and out, because UCLA got the ball to open the second half. They go out, get a 3 and out. They forced that fumble, which had potential to be a scoop and score for Jaden Reed. I mean, it's a hell of a hit and almost scooped up his own forced fumble for a touchdown. But UCLA's quarterback, Justin Martin, was fortunate enough to fall in that. They did end up having to kick from their own back of their own end zone, though, and Penn State converts the great field position into a field goal, which, that's something we'll get into a little later in the show about having a kicking game. That's the good part. But they get a field goal. Next possession, second half for UCLA, it's 5 plays, -7 yards total, punting again. And Penn State comes back down, scores another touchdown. So that's when they made 24-3. And that's where they really effectively slam the door on, any possibility of UCLA hanging around in this one. So then they come back, they force 3 and out. Next possession, Penn State's go 3 and out themselves. And then next possession, UCLA goes 7 plays, 42 yards, gets down into the red zone again. This time they stall out, turnover on downs at the Penn State 12. So again, there's a bend but don't break in action there. Penn State responds by starting from their own 12. Aller completes a nice 57-yarder to Liam Clifford into Bruin territory, which sets up Ryan Barker's 40-yard field goal, which has us feeling even better about kicker going into next week. And then after that, UCLA goes on a 16-play, 73-yard touchdown drive and eats up almost 8 minutes of clock towards the end of the game. This is against, mainly backups, so that's something I'm super concerned with. So you look at that drive, I look at that drive chart, and I'm like, okay, the defense, once again, I mean, Tom Allen made some adjustments at halftime, and they really put the clamps on UCLA's offense in the second half with that 3 and out, and then, just another pushing them backwards in the next drive. So mixed bag for the defense. There were some, they moved the ball more than expected, but also starters only gave up 3 points. So, I think, probably I would put it in the B minus range if it was me. So, but what was your, I'll say, so when it comes to the defense, I should say another shout out to, I know we picked on a little bit of the secondary, but Dejon Lane, true freshman, he's had to fill in some huge shoes with KJ Winston being out of a long-term injury, but I'd say he might have made the play of the game for the defense. Early in the game, UCLA, what set up their field goal was Martin found TJ Harden, his running back, streaking down the sideline. Looked like maybe a busted coverage. And Martin, had nothing but daylight in front of him. And it looked like he might get a touchdown, but Lane comes in, pushes him out around the 10-yard line, and defense does its part. They prevent them from a field goal, which prevent them from getting a touchdown, which, a situation like that, that's a win for the defense and really another missed opportunity for UCLA to make it a real, truly competitive game. So I would say, Lane, I wonder, I feel like we should give UCLA some credit here. They came in yesterday afternoon. So you're thinking they're still jet lagged. They're still on West Coast time. This is a 9 a.m. Pacific time kick. And yet, I'd say they didn't act like a team that was acting as if the moment was too big for them. How much of this do you think maybe is due to maybe UCLA being better than we anticipated? And also, do you think there was maybe a hangover effect for Penn State after that primetime win over Illinois last weekend?
I mean, certainly, certainly you could, posit that, but I don't think I think it's probably more that UCLA is a little bit better. But I mean, yeah, you mentioned the late arrival for UCLA. Really, Penn State looks like the team that was that was kind of groggy starting the game, and UCLA was all amped up. Yeah, so I don't necessarily think it's hangover, and I don't. I mean, the amount of times that James Franklin, preaches the 1-0 mentality, and taking every game as it is. You don't want to say, oh, they were looking ahead and they were just kind of assuming they were going to win. But I mean, how did players and even maybe in coaches, but I would say more often than not, the players not hear the talk about this gigantic spread all week? If you hear that you're favored by almost depending on the day of the week, this week, 4 touchdowns, it's hard not to be maybe a little bit complacent. But of course, no Penn State player is going to say that. That's why they're going to say that UCLA is a good football team, and we had to make some adjustments, and we made those adjustments, and we got the win, and we're going to look at the film and we're going to move on. Yeah, I'm not necessarily going to go with the hangover or the trap game. I think that was a lot of the dialogue again is, well, you have this amped up crowd for the unofficial whiteout with Illinois, and then you have this big showdown with the USC next week, and in between you have this UCLA game, the stripe out. So it's certainly it's hard not to think that some of that stuff could have played a little bit of a role, but it's tough. I was just thinking back to the Illinois performance, and I think we came away from that matchup thinking that it was a lot more dominant in the second half. But really, in my view, these are 2 games in a row that Penn State out-talented. They weren't necessarily the better team all 4 quarters of both games. And I mean, at least they didn't play the best, I should say. They didn't play the best all 4 quarters of both matchups. I think you can make an argument that UCLA played better, parts of this game than Penn State did. I mean, if you look at the stats, certainly that bears it out. Penn State was just better than certainly. I mean, go back to the Champagne Room post. They certainly think Penn State was better, and they're not really even saying Penn State played better than Illinois. They're playing, So I don't know how bitter or not UCLA fans will be. I know that they don't have a SB Nation blog to go to like most of our Big Ten teams do, but it's I think UCLA was better than we thought. I think is the kind of where I come down on that. Certainly, their performance against Oregon was closer than I expected Oregon to blow them out, and they didn't. And then I thought Penn State would have an easier time. And whether it's the quarterback's performance, which I think Justin Martin should get some serious look at starting, even if Garbers comes back in the future. I think that Martin should definitely start if I were a Bruins coach. Yeah, so it's hard for me to buy into the trap game or overlooking or that kind of dialogue, that narrative, because that seems like you're excusing um, execution sometimes or mistakes on the field.
Yeah, and then, Martin, I'm pulling up his stats here. Statistically, good game from him. And considering this is his very first start, he only thrown 5 career passes, and his first career start, of course, is at Beaver Stadium of all places. 22 of 30, 167 yards and a touchdown. So, not a kid who was afraid of the spotlight or felt like the moment was too big for him. You can give some credit to Eric Bieniemy, UCLA's offensive coordinator. He gave him some easy, makeable throws to do. Although I'm a little surprised he didn't draw up more designed runs for Martin, considering how nimble he is on his feet. I mean, I thought they were going to try to throw some more design QB runs at Penn State. I was shocked they didn't do that. And then I was especially surprised, to open the second half, they were trying to run like jet sweeps and screen passes, trying to move the ball horizontally, which Penn State showed that in the season opener in West Virginia. You cannot get away with that against this defense. They're too quick. They're going to snuff that out. You gotta beat this Penn State defense vertically. So they kind of got away from that a little bit in the second half. So don't know why, but I'm okay with that, quite frankly. So I guess my next, before we get on to kicker, I guess next thing is, what would you need to see, or where do you think the biggest improvement needs to be between now and next week in order to beat USC?
Well, it's got to be on the. Well, that's actually a good question because I think the offense needs to get. We need to see the Penn State offense that started the season. I think because the defense, no matter how good they play, USC is going to put up points. So I don't think I was about to say, well, the secondary's got to tighten up their pass coverage, but I haven't seen enough from the secondary consistently. I've seen moments from Harris and Kimber, and certainly from Reed as well at the safety spot. But the pass defense is not consistent enough for sure. But on the offensive side, I think more. I hesitate to go back to this. The more explosive pass plays, we saw a lot more medium to deep throws the first few games. They tried a couple, 15 to 20 yard pass plays that didn't connect. Most of them, there were a couple drops. Amari Evans had a drop on the sideline where I think he was focused more on getting his feet in bounds and not catching the ball. There was a couple low throws to Fleming that would have been 10 to 15 yards that he couldn't haul in. Now, obviously, there was that deep pass to Clifford that was just a tiny bit underthrown. So, I don't want to, beat the dead horse from last year about the more explosive pass plays, but that I think that can open up the run game a little bit more. I think if you connect on those deeper pass plays, and I think against a defense like USC's, there's potential with that. And I think the offensive line has done a much better job with run blocking consistently. I mean, this game was, I think, like you mentioned, I think if Singleton had been in the game, I think the run game would have been a lot more successful. However, having said that, I mean, Penn State's first 3 drives, Allen had at least a 5-yard gain on every first down. So, I mean, the amount of first downs to start Penn State drives that started with Allen running for 5 yards, 7 yards, 10 yards, 11 yards. And then the success on second and third down didn't come necessarily. So I think if I haven't done the carry by carry analysis for Allen, but most of his yardage probably came on first down, which I think is a positive, but then if you can't continue that production on second and third, then that's an issue. I realize I've jumped around a little bit, but I think going back to your initial question, I think the pass game needs to be more explosive, and then certainly the pass defense needs to be better. But I'm not really too optimistic about that next week anyway.
A couple things about it. I guess we mentioned explosive pass plays, and I'm looking at just the receiving chart here. So, Liam Clifford, his longest was a 57-yard catch. I believe he also had another. When you do the math, still 2 catches. All of his receptions were explosive plays. And Harrison Wallace, Trey Wallace had a 25-yard reception. Tyler Warren and Julian Fleming both had 15-yard catches. And Fleming, by the way, feel bad for the kid. I really thought he was about to get his first touchdown in an A-line uniform.
So close.
Refs marked him a bit. It was the right call, but I just felt for the kid. I really thought he was going to do it. But I think there were several explosive pass plays, and I really thought in the second quarter Drew really got going with those medium and deep balls, and it kind of carried over into the second half as well. Interesting stat, by the way. I took a picture of it on my phone when they flashed it up on the broadcast, but Penn State first quarter had only 33 yards of total offense. They finished the game with 322 total yards. So, as you said, they cannot start like that. They can't have a first quarter like that against USC, or they will find themselves digging out of a hole. So definitely got to start faster next week on the road in LA. But I guess I do want to discuss now the kicking game, because man, I think we might finally have a kicker, Lando. Ryan Barker gets his chance now with Sanders Hadak having missed a pair of field goals last week against Illinois, which if he had made those, Penn State actually would have covered the spread and won a little more comfortably. But Barker comes in, he kicks a chip shot 25-yarder early on, or in the third quarter, and that was their opening drive of the second half, makes it 17-3. And then later on, it was 24-3. He has a little bit of a longer attempt, which I wanted to see him try. So 40-yarder, which Sahadak missed from last week. Barker gets it just through the left upright and good. So 2 for 2 on the day. So it feels, at least right now, it feels like Lando, the kicking game field goal kicking game has been shored up, which could not have come at a better time, because they're probably not going to finish all their scoring drives in the end zone next week, and they will need to get points wherever they can. So just any thoughts on kicking?
Well, I don't know if you saw they on TV, they replayed James Franklin's reaction to the 25-yard field goal, but the amount of elation in his body.
I think I saw the
this one. So I think that is very telling. But those 2 field goals meant a lot to the fan base, I think. Really no doubt on the first one. The second one I thought was drifting slightly towards that goalpost. But so maybe it was a 45-yard field goal. Maybe that drifts off. But certainly, it was nice to not be worried about those kicks. I think going in, like you mentioned, going into a game where there's not going to be a guaranteed touchdowns, that you're going to need a kicker, and certainly going forward in the season. So it's great for Barker to satisfy any Lion fans.
Absolutely. Although while we're on the subject of special teams, Bradley Thompson, late at one point in the game when he was punting near his own end zone, he damn near had it blocked. I actually thought it got blocked. The way and what the sound the microphone was picking up, it sounded like it got blocked. Maybe they got a piece of it, but still ended up going about like 40 yards or so and around midfield. But that was kind of a bit of a close call there. If if UCLA blocks it, maybe that goes for touchdown, and suddenly you got a more interesting ball game going forward. But I think they needed to shore up the punt blocking a little bit. And return game, you saw Zion Tracy return kicks, and Gus Johnson just kept misstating his name as Caden Saunders, even though the injury report had been out that Caden Saunders wasn't going to play and was in a boot.
Yeah, I think he was thrown by the number change.
I think, that's what it was.
Yeah.
I think they both were number 7. So
yeah,
he got a little confused there, but that was kind of funny to see. But the big thing is, like, could not have shored up the kicking game at a more critical juncture. They're going to need those points later on. And I feel like at this point, we've probably talked all we could about UCLA. Again, it was not an inspiring win, but they handled them without too much trouble. It never felt like a game that was truly in doubt, and they just sort of salted it away in the second half, especially. Lando, you got any final thoughts on UCLA?
Well, sorry to Dan Lynn to spoil his homecoming. Well, and actually, I
Actually, Dan Lynn is USC's defensive coordinator now.
That's right. I forgot that he. Yeah, you know what? I should have known better. Apologies. I know. Last year he was UCLA's, but well, then look out, Dan Lynn. How about that? There's my segue into USC. There you go. But no, I think I mean, this means nothing coming from a Penn State grad to UCLA, but I think they should be encouraged. The fans should be encouraged by their effort and their performance. I think they have a new starting quarterback. And, the running back certainly showed promise. The Michigan State transfer Berger, I think, had a couple nice plays. It's I think defensively they were much improved. So I think it's a win. Penn State gets the win and turn the page on the Bruins.
Absolutely. Before we chat briefly about USC, I just want to thank you all for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. The channel name is there in the bottom, Black Shoe Diaries PSU. Right before we went live, we had 84 subscribers. We're trying to get to 100 subscribers, so then Patrick will do a show shirtless for us. So
everybody wants that.
Everybody wants shirtless Pat. So we'll get a shirtless Pat of another 16 subscribers. So if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Just real quick, because we are going to do a preview show on Wednesday, Patrick and I discussing USC, but just your first thoughts on the Trojans and, how confident are you feeling about Penn State's chances of getting out of there with a win next week?
Well, for those of you that do read Black Shoe Diaries, and especially our prediction post, that pessimist Lando is a thing. So I naturally assume that they will lose against any, comparable team, whether that's a Michigan and Ohio State, a USC. And especially on the road, that's definitely, it's going to be a challenge. I think I know this is the truth for any football game, but I think if Penn State can control the trenches, and I think their offensive line has shown the ability to really push teams around. And I think USC is a team that Penn State could potentially do that. So I think if they have the kind of drive that they had, the 16 play drive that they had in today's game, honestly, the drive that UCLA had to end this game, those kind of drives against USC, that I think that's the way they're going to win. I think judging by how this game went, I don't know if Penn State can win in a shootout. If the Penn State offense that started the season shows up, I think we could have a shootout. Certainly, I think USC's defense has shown holes, and they're beatable. But I think the physicality of Penn State is going to be the way that they're going to win. So I think ball control, really, if Singleton is 100% back to full health and in the game, I think that's a huge, huge plus for Penn State, certainly. And I think that is the way that Penn State's going to win. I think if Singleton doesn't play again, which at this point I would doubt that he.
I'd be shocked if he's not.
Yeah, I would. Right,
held out today, but just to make sure he's 100% for USC.
Right. So
they absolutely are going to need him.
Yeah, so I think if all things go as planned and he plays, I think they have a shot. But I don't think they're going to be able to keep pace unless the defensive line does what they can. I mean, they have the ability to do that. I think the defensive line and the offensive line are going to really have to assert their will. And I think if they can do that, I think there's a shot for Penn State. But if they can't reproduce the kind of effort that they did in the second half offensively against Illinois, where they just pushed them around the whole second half, I think USC will come out with it. But we'll have to see what you and Pat say on Wednesday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously getting Singleton back is priority number one, and I have zero doubt that he will be back against USC. I mean, I think, yeah, I don't know. I was wondering before Franklin confirmed at the post game that he wasn't going to be available, but I was wondering myself, maybe it's just like being held out as like a break glass in case of emergency option, not unlike Derek Moye in the 10-7 win over Illinois and the snow in 2011. Thankfully, we never had anything close to an emergency there. But yeah, I think I agree on the whole winning it in the trenches thing. I just pulled up Michigan's box score against USC, a game which they won with only 32 yards passing. They ran for 290 yards on them, and they were able to push around that D line. Obviously, if they're able to do that, so I think that's where the secret lies for Penn State to get the win. And again, get into more detail on this on Wednesday's preview show. So I know we're showing a little bit shorter than we typically do. We try to go to at least like 40, 45 minutes, but I feel like there's only so much you can discuss when you're talking about taking care of business with UCLA and waiting till Wednesday to do a full USC preview. So, Lando, if you have any final thoughts before we call it a day?
Well, like you said, I think let's hope that the offensive line that for Penn State shows up just like Michigan's did, like you said, and it's a win's a win. I think just to relax, a win. They got the win. Let's acknowledge the win and move on to USC.
Well said, sir. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. Again, be sure to follow us at our YouTube channel. It's Black Shoe Diaries PSU. You can also follow us on Twitter at BSD Tweets. I also have my personal handle and next to my name in parentheses on there if you're that interested in following me on Twitter as well. Also, blackshoediaries.com. Check us out. We've got plenty of football coverage for you. I've already got 3 takeaways from today's game posted, and we'll have a whole slew of posts tomorrow, including my position grades posts. Lando, I don't remember. Do you have a football post you typically do?
Well, I mean, I did do today's recap, so that was
okay. So you do
that was posted, and then as far as I do mostly I do like the bowl projections, and I also do the rankings posts that will come out tomorrow, and then I do also do the Nittany Lions and the NFL post later. So
right. Well, there you have it, folks. Check out Lando and I's posts as well as all the others we put up. blackshoediaries.com. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you again this upcoming Wednesday when we preview USC.